Hey guys, it's Bridget from Open Chair Counseling, and today I wanted to interview Adam um, a little bit because this has been something that's come up with a lot of my female clients who are in like committed relationships or marriages, and so I guess I'll kind of direct the question to you. So I've noticed a pattern with a lot of my female clients where they feel like they can't ask things of their partners. Like they can't ask for extra help around the house or like, additional engagement with their children or like for their husband to consider making a job change, because like they're just struggling financially and like they feel like the wife or the girlfriend feels like she's doing everything that she possibly can and she's like completely expended all of her energy, but they don't feel like they can ask their husband or their boyfriend or partner, however they phrase it, to do anything additionally in the relationship or to make any kind of adjustments or changes because there's this fear of like hurting their husband or their partner's feelings or like damaging his ego in some way or challenging his masculinity. Why, like from your research, because I know that you've researched and looked into a lot of like toxic masculinity versus authentic masculinity. What what have you noticed, or like what could you kind of hypothesize is a possible reason why it seems to be like there's a whole generation of like men who just continue to be like man babies, and although they are grown adults, they don't want to act like adults, and there's like this whole generation of women who are married to them or like in a committed relationship with them who feel like they have to do it all to the detriment of themselves.
I would start by saying that's big questions.
Yeah.
They're very, very large questions to take apart. So, going to start by kind of taking it apart into two questions. I would start with like the relationship side of the things, is I would say like
Okay.
so kind of to your question of like women not wanting to confront her husband, spouse, significant other who's a man.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say kind of like the first step is like, I would say in all honesty, like if they're not able to handle it, then that's kind of their problem. Now that doesn't necessarily mean
If who's not able to
the
handle
man.
it. Okay.
If the man can't
Right.
handle being confronted some, then that's their problem, not yours. With the caveat of there's particular ways that you should be saying things to people, right?
Right. Like I'm not suggesting that people be like absurdly mean.
Yeah.
But like being honest about, hey, I need help in these areas. If you signed up to be in a partnership together, isn't that part of being in a partnership?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at is like, I think if, I think you were talking about a situation where somebody like their spouse was like playing video games all the time and stuff like that. And it's like, what I would say is this. This is how I would kind of break it down, is I would say men have a very like, all right, so follow me on this. Violence is a huge thing for men, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
So in being a man, right, there is a piece where like a healthy, good man is able to be, knows full well that they could be a monster, but chooses to be a protector, right? And if men are living in a way that they are either A, told they cannot ever be a monster, or B, don't ever learn how to appropriately be like an aggressive man, right? Like when the appropriate time is, then they will hide and find that in places that are easier to get at, All right. So that's why. Okay. So like, besides the obvious reason why men do porn, like look at porn,
Mm.
an underlying reason is that it makes them feel powerful. All right.
Hmm.
It puts
Okay.
them in a
Interesting.
situation where they're in control. Okay. And so what that means is that's the same reason also why a man is going to go towards something like video games over spending time with his wife.
Mm.
Because if he feels like he isn't confident
Mm-hmm.
in the relationship and
Mm-hmm.
how to handle himself, well, he's confident with the, fake gun in Call of Duty, right? Like, I
Right.
know I can win in that, right? And so, in that, to kind of like caveat it back a little bit to the women's side of it, because I want to explain some of that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there seems to, I don't want to like cut you off, but there seems to be this pattern of like the woman in the relationship feeling like she has to prevent her husband from feeling anything uncomfortable. So, like, I don't want to approach the subject with him because I don't want him to feel like I'm attacking him and I need to protect him from feeling uncomfortable.
Mm.
It's like, well, one, you can't control how somebody feels. So you can't protect them from feeling uncomfortable all the time. Um, they're going to naturally feel how they naturally feel. You can't do anything to stop that. And if you can't ask them for things like, hey, I need more help around the house, or like, hey, I really need you to engage more often with our children, or hey, we might need to think about making like some financial adjustments or a career move. If you can't ask them for things like that, then what can you ask your partner for? Like, what is the benefit of being in a partnership if one person is never being confronted by anything because you're so afraid of like damaging their ego?
Yeah. And so, yeah. So, again, lots of question there.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say is the first thing is like, as a to speak really quickly to women in that situation. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but as a woman, your responsibility is, don't overstate it. Your goal is to empower your husband to do what he is most likely naturally wired to do. Okay?
Like in an ideal relationship,
Yes.
the wife or the girlfriend's like role is to like kind of support and encourage him to use that like
Yeah,
strength,
I wouldn't
that
even use the
violence.
term support. I would say empower, right? Like your
Okay.
goal is to push them to being like to help push them to being what they are naturally, right? There's a reason why like every single guy out there who's had a daughter, okay? Like they can I don't have a daughter, but I've seen this with tons of people.
Yeah.
When you have a daughter, you watch men go from like not as protective to like I will freaking murder people for this kid.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Nothing's getting between me and
Like
her.
that's why every single like almost every single guy, like kind of more manly guy, I'll say, is like I have a gun and a shovel or some version of that, and if my daughter's boyfriend does anything, no one's gonna miss him, right? Okay, and so I believe every single guy has to some extent hardwired into them a protective piece, okay, a protective violent piece.
Mm-hmm.
But what often happens is that in that men have a tendency towards laziness in working on that piece. Okay, like it's like what's a good example of this? It's like if you're kind of constantly in some version of threat, like a threat assessment, then you're not going to do as much as you would if you weren't in some level of threat assessment, right? Okay, so like
Yeah, you don't have like a fire lit under your butt to do anything.
yes, but like so if you're sitting okay, so again, really big thought. Back in ye olden days, supposedly men sat side to side looking out at hunting. Women sat in a circle protecting each other's back. Okay, men sat in such a way that they were not protecting their backside because they kind of were leaving that available. Like something could come up behind them because they were like forward thinking, right? Okay, so like that same thing. What it means is that often when a man gets comfortable, a man gets lazy.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I then come into with the piece of the wife being like, hey, stop playing video games and get a job,
Mm-hmm.
is like, that's why it's so important that a woman like is able to have those conversations with their husband and push on them.
Yeah.
Because I would say most men have a desire to go forward,
Mm-hmm.
but they also have a movement, like it's very easy for them to get complacent.
So why do you think that that's happening so much in kind of like our generation of married and dating people? Because it, like 50 years ago, it was just kind of the expected norm that, like, you know, as soon as a man graduated from high school, he immediately got a job at like a factory or at a like a mortgage brokership or something, and he worked that job until like the day he died, and his wife stayed home and had, you know, 4 beautiful children and, you know, a perfectly manicured house. And like, I'm not saying that everybody has to fit into those stereotypes and that necessarily was like the best way to live, but it seems like there's this huge change from like our parents' generation to our generation of like men who seem like they just want to be perpetual children. Why do you think that shifted?
So I would say I'll give you kind of two of my main thoughts on it. There's probably more. So again, big questions. At some point, we'll do another video probably on like some of these specifics. Maybe
I'm kind of breaking it down.
we kind of break
more.
down into some smaller areas because it's a big thing. So there's a guy. I think he's still alive, but I'm not 100% sure. His name's Robert Bly, and he at one point wrote this book called Iron John, where he talks about like one of the processes that a man has to go through to like enter manhood is to kind of like break his bond with his mom. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So like you have to kind of like move away from the safe, protective relationship and into the more dangerous relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I think mixed into that now is like in the less than 100 years, we've moved from hunter-gatherer societies to like egalitarian, I think is the term, like more like a completely different society. We've moved from it. It used to be that, you know, the dad would work in the field and the son would go out there and work in the field with him. And now it's like dad's out there doing his job. I never see it. He comes back home. So all these things combined have resulted in like men having kind of like a mass identity crisis in the West, where like for so long being a man meant like you go out, you live, you do. Like, you know, there's a reason why even now men work higher risk jobs across the board than women, right?
Like there's more like welders,
welders, like high up welders, you know,
cell
like
phone tower electricians where
yeah,
you're like
all
suspended way up in the air.
Yeah, stuff where like I mean the reason why, if you take the like almost exclusively the reason why, well, there's two main variables. The two main variables that make it so that the median age that men live is younger than women is simply
Because
like
of the risk factor.
it's because of how many die at a younger age because of doing risks and pull the number down, and it's because of health choices, because men also work significantly more hours. So then they eat less good food, they take less good care of their health, they die younger. Okay?
And statistically, men who are married live longer, right?
Live longer, make more money,
are in better health.
Consistently rate their life as happier than men who are single. So with that identity crisis, then what happened is that, so back to Robert Bly, he talks about I think it's the 80s and 90s, he talks about it as the softening of men. So there was this big push when I was like a kid and maybe a teen, where men were supposed to be like more soft, more connected, more like
In touch with their emotions.
emotionally present and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all good stuff. Not saying that's bad,
Right, not bashing on that,
but it resulted in that, like, it resulted in more of that loss of identity, where men are like, I'm supposed to be, as a whole, not each individual, I'm supposed to be like out doing and working,
Mhm.
but now I'm being told to be like also at home with kids, and like, there it just became this identity crisis, right? And so, like, in the case of how then can, like, on an individual level, what's going on, I would say most of the time what's going on is a man who doesn't have a real clear direct purpose in his life of what he wants to accomplish,
Mhm.
a man who prioritizes like things other than himself and his relationship and his protectiveness, and a man who maybe never fully disconnected from his family of origin.
Mm.
That's what I see the most consistently in like an individual basis in my practice.
So then do you think a lot of those women that like I kind of have in mind, like some of my female clients who are afraid if I confront him or I like kind of critique him, I'm going to damage his masculinity. I'm going to dent his ego. Like maybe he'll resent me. Do you think they're in a way they're right? Like maybe that would happen. Like do you think men just can't take it? Is that correct?
I would say they're right, but I would say I don't think that means. I would say they're right in their viewpoint of what they think might happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're right in the way that they're carrying out that thing.
They're choosing
Yeah.
to avoid
I would say,
having the conversation?
I would say you're probably right on. If your husband is I'll always use the term I use all the time. If they're a man baby, if they just haven't like really like moved into like adulthood all the way, you're right on. You're going to hurt their feelings. Like, you're going to insult their masculinity. They're not going to like it.
Right. Which, like, that's understandable. I think if somebody gave me the critique of, like, Bridget, you're just not doing enough. You're not measuring up. Like, of course I would be hurt by that. Of course I would feel like I'd failed, and that would make me not want to try again. Or at very least it would impact my desire to want to try again. So, like, I can totally understand that. So, I don't know, I guess my question is, like what is the alternative? What is to be done about this so that couples can healthily move forward in their relationship and both people feel like it's as fair as it can be, that both people are helping support each other, so that it's not all on one person in the relationship to like float the other person.
I would say first things first is always like start with yourself. So I would always say start with asking the question to your husband, to your significant other, of like I said earlier, how can I better support you in X? Okay, because you always want to start there. I would say from there, your husband should then ask the question, how can I support you? If they don't, just tell them.
Okay? Just tell them how they
just be like, hey, I asked you this question. Here's how I need you to support me better.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say, trying to figure out how I want to say this well. I would say it is crucially important from my perspective that the man of the relationship figures out how to be the man of the relationship. Okay? So, like, controversial topic here. I'm a huge believer that men should be, at least from a protective and safety perspective, the leader of the relationship. Okay? We can go into the biologicals of like the biological perspective of how women know there's a clock going off in their body all the time. Women know that if they get pregnant, they're incredibly unsafe. Like they're in a very dangerous position.
Well, they're really vulnerable.
Very vulnerable, and so they need people. They need someone to protect them. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right. Women are awesome. You guys are all amazingly strong. There's something there. Okay.
Yeah.
So in that, I think it's super important that a woman in that relationship would handle it with as much grace as possible, but also and not let the man off the hook. Okay. If their ego gets hurt a little bit, okay, right?
Yeah, it's
now,
kind of collateral damage.
If you're going after their ego
on purpose,
that's another conversation.
Just for the intention of hurting them.
Yes. If you're saying, hey, hey, Robert, like, I really feel like I'm putting in more work than you, and I just need you to pick up more slack. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. That's not a hurtful thing to say to somebody, right? Mm-hmm. If they take that hurtfully, then hand them my business card and they can come talk to me. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I tell my guy clients all the time, this is kind of an aside, but I tell my guy clients all the time, I'm like, if your wife gets upset at you, your responsibility is to take the bullet. It's like, don't argue. Like, do your best to not argue. Just shut your mouth and let her tell you all the things you're doing wrong.
Because she's probably right.
She may be right. But also just because it's like, again, let's talk back in time, and kind of a safety thing. Lots of the times I think this is true in our relationship often, which is like when you are mad, I think you can disagree with me on this, when you're mad, it's very imperative that I do not come off as threatening, because then you become very defensive, because I think women traditionally feel like they're the weaker partner in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think it becomes super counterproductive to the relationship if the man is like screaming and shouting back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I also think that goes back to like my own personal trauma history of having men in my life that I expected to be a protector who used that power against me, simply like for the sheer pleasure of like making people uncomfortable, like making people fearful, like making their family fearful of what they might do.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's, some of that might be just, biologically, like you said, women, have kind of this innate understanding, notion, fear, I don't know, of being taken advantage of being the weaker person. And you are 6'4" and I'm 5'3". So like you definitely have the advantage over me physically. Mm-hmm. And then I think some of that is also just like my own trauma history and stuff that like I'm trying to be more conscious of like I've put my faith and my trust in men in the past who I expected to take care of me, to protect me, and they did the opposite.
But I'll say even like I agree, like, but I'll just for my own anecdotal with clients.
Yeah.
I've told male clients before as simple things as I've said, if you and your wife start getting in an argument, I tell them if you're both standing up, go sit down as the man. And they always look at me like it's super weird. And I'm like, put yourself in like the least aggressive position you can be, right? So like, even when you and I get in fights, I know I'll put like a couch between us sometimes because like I want it to be as safe as possible, right?
I've noticed sometimes too, if you and I ever get in an argument, you'll like sometimes catch yourself and you'll immediately drop the volume of your voice to like almost a whisper.
Yeah. And so that's where like I started at the beginning with talking about the thing about like what I believe to get to the idea of kind of toxic masculinity and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, which I don't like that term anymore because I think it's been taken away to be distorted, but that's not super important. But like, to get to that idea, a healthy man, in my opinion, I kind of referenced this earlier, is a monster who controls themselves. Okay? So like, I know full well in myself, if something was to happen to Bridget, if somebody was to do something, it wouldn't probably be a pretty experience for them, right? Okay. Like, within reason, it's not like if they just insult someone, I'm going to go like beat them up. But like, if something truly physically happened, I would go do something about it, right? But I'm not just like wandering around like punching people, right? So like, I think why that's important then for your clients, for women, is don't attempt to shut down the fact that your husband has strong emotions, particularly anger. Don't, however, allow him to use his anger to hurt you. Right? So like, if his anger exists because he's trying to do something and he's trying to help and he's trying to support, he's trying to protect, encourage that anger. Don't encourage like violent aggressiveness towards you or towards other people that isn't a protective mindset. And that's a weird answer to a question, but like, I think that's super important for women to understand, is not all anger is bad anger.
It's necessarily bad.
I actually break anger down into anger, frustration, and rage with my clients. So frustration, I say, is like unproductive anger. It's just an anger that stews in you, but you never do anything about it. And you're just frustrated. I'm frustrated with my boss, but you never actually go talk to him. Okay. Rage is just blowing up.
It's like seeing red.
Seeing red, just going crazy. It's taking anger and then just like not doing anything to like use it productively. It's just an explosion. And then
it's just like destructive.
Yeah. And anger is something that's useful and should be moving towards something. Okay. It's not like, and so like, it's kind of finding out how to, I think in DBT, they talk about the middle road. Like
the middle path.
I kind of think about it like that same way with that, where it's like, you're going to be fighting this battle constantly of going to rage, of going to just frustration. And it's kind of always kind of trying to stay in, like, when you're feeling this strong emotion of like madness, how do you appropriately stay in anger and move it towards something productive as opposed to it becoming rage or frustration, right? It's kind of a weird way to think about it. And I'm kind of talking about it less in just an emotion perspective and more in like a think about the emotion from that perspective. But like, I think that's kind of the value. The thing is like, I'll give this analogy. It's like, if you've ever gone kayaking, right? I'm not a super amazing kayaker, but I'm good enough that I can like be in the back of a 2-person kayak. Okay. It's like, I know what I'm doing, but I'm not like anything spectacular. There's 2 kinds of people, or there's 3 kinds of people that sit in the front. Okay. There's the person who at least knows enough of what they're doing that they put their paddle strokes for the most part on the right side. They like paddle at the right times. They'll communicate with you a little bit. Okay, that's the good one. All right. There's the people who have no idea what they're doing, but they're just paddling like a maniac, and you have to literally like smack them with your paddle and be like, "Stop!" Like, I can't turn the kayak if you're just like raging on ahead. Okay. And then there's the people who like, if you tell them a direction, like, hey, I need you to like, can you stop paddling for a second? Then they just go, and you can paddle it all, right? Okay. Those are the 3 kind of people in front of the kayak. Okay.
Well, I don't feel like I fit any of those, so I think there's a 4th kind.
Yes.
I think there's the kind that's like, I know that I don't have as much upper body strength as my kayaking partner. So I'm gonna let them be in the back so that they can be like the motor, and then I will just be like the helpful steerer in the front. So like you, like when you and I go kayaking, like the one time of year that we actually do, you're usually in the back because you are much stronger than I am and you can paddle better than me, and then you just tell me like, okay, 2 paddles to your right. All right, now 1 hard one to your left. All right, good. Okay, you can slow down. Yeah, take a break. All right, 1 more to your right. Like, I just kind of let you like tell me what to do so we don't crash.
Which I think was the first one we talked about.
Is it?
Yes. It's just like knowing what you're doing, communicating.
I don't feel like I know what I'm doing though.
Knowing enough, like you know what you're doing to like let me tell you what you're doing. That's
Okay.
what I mean by that.
Anyway, I took us off course.
Those 3 people, those 3 kinds of people in the front, it's like the one you want to be is the one who's like communicating, working with your part, like working with the other person, working with your emotions, working towards an end goal with people, not like the rage monster or the just frustration monster, right? Okay. And like, so that's what I think is important for men to understand. Again, for women, what it is it's like you're trying to encourage that middle ground and discourage the 2 end ground, like the 2 edges. Okay. So when we go back to the original person, okay, like the original kind of the guy playing video games.
Yeah, that was the analogy I gave this morning. Because I've heard this from some of my female clients of like, I can't ask my husband to do anything around the house because I might, like upset him or he might resent me or something. But he spends all of his free time when he gets home from work just like playing Call of Duty in the basement or something. And then she's stuck, like she's, working and going to school and raising kids and taking care of all of the bills and cleaning the house and, taking the dog for a walk. Like she's literally doing it all, and the husband is just like in his own little world who can't be bothered, or like she's afraid that he can't be bothered.
So I would say that man is a frustrated man. Like he's just hanging out in frustration. He's like, I am, I can guess that something along these lines happened at one point. This is not picking on the wife in this situation. The husband was like, I'm going to clean up for my wife one day. And then the wife came home and said something to the effect of, oh, you didn't put the dishes in the right place. Yeah. All right. And that resulted in this man just being a frustrated, I'm going to do nothing. Right. Which is his problem. Like you should be able to figure out how to get past that. Right. But that's what I see with that. Right. And that's what then drives people towards like, playing video games way too much, like I said, watching porn, not like working towards their like valued goal, right? And so like in that situation, it's like, yeah, like as the wife, you need to, like I said, start with yourself. You need to say, I'm exhausted and I need you to do more. Like I think that's a perfectly appropriate way to say it, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think most often when you give people a why and not just a what, they're much more likely to follow through and give you what you want. So if it's the what of like, I need you to help out more, or I need you to make more money, or, I need you to get off your butt and clean something. That does feel a lot more aggressive, a lot more attacking than like, hey, we need to sit down and have a conversation. Here's the why. I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm drowning. I'm doing all of these things and I have no more energy to give. And if I don't get more help from you, things will fall apart. Like I cannot do this on my own. I don't have anything left. And you're giving them the why behind the what that you want them to do. I think people are much more likely to hear that emotion and be empathetic towards it and then have more motivation to like, okay, now I have a reason to help them with something other than just like they're critiquing me just for the sake of critiquing me.
Yeah, I would say too, like just another thing to think about is like conflict in a relationship is not in and of itself bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really tough thing for lots of people to figure out is like having a conflict is not necessarily bad. In fact, there's no bearing on the health of your relationship of how often you fight. It's only like how well you resolve it, right? Okay. So like why I say that is one of the things, first of all, I say to all of my clients is I say a healthy marriage or healthy relationship is 1,000 skirmishes and no wars, right? Like, in fact, you should lean into arguments because if you have like smaller single topic arguments 2 times a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 7 times a week, it doesn't really matter what the number is, then you're less likely to have a massive blow up.
Yeah.
And so I often encourage,
as long as the smaller arguments are resolved, right?
Yes. Okay. I mean, you need, always come to some kind of resolution. That's just always a good thing.
Because I could see that if those went unresolved and you had an argument every single day, that would just compound upon itself.
Yes. And then I would say the thing that I tell all of my usually male clients, which again, in my opinion, ideally, this would be the man leading this thing that I'm about to say and a lot of things, is that you should just set up like a weekly house meeting. Like you should literally sit down weekly because it's going to do 2 things. You're going to know when you're going to have tough conversations. And you're going to know when you're going to have tough conversations. So then you know if something comes up, right? Okay, so let's say, I don't know, you're running around. Let's say you have kids. You're running around with your kids and something happens and it's just like, oh man, I want to have this fight right now. Like I want to be like, why did you do this? It's easier to shelf it and wait when you know there's a scheduled time that like you can have discussion, right? And so like I always say like start with something like that. It can be like, I mean, we usually go on roughly a weekly date night of some kind.
Yeah.
And even if it's that, if it's sitting out with a drink in your hand, having that conversation and being like, hey husband, I'm like just exhausted and I need more from you, right? And then like not having it be, I need more from you, I need this, just being like, I just need more, I really need some support. Can we talk about how you can help me out more? And make it a dialogue. The beautiful thing about having any tougher conversation in a public place is people are always calmer in public places.
That's true. They don't want to make a scene.
Think about that as an option.
Yeah.
And then I would say, like, we'll come back sometime with a fair fighting rules. We'll kind of talk about, like, a good thing to figure out and kind of set up is, like, what's kind of appropriate in an argument. And just kind of knowing that.
Yep.
That's a slightly aside to the man thing. What I would say, just to kind of wrap up, is Iron John by Robert Bly is amazing. Every man should buy it. And then, what's the book by? Falling Upward by
Richard
Rohr.
Yeah, super good.
I would highly recommend those 2 books for the men in your life.
So kind of like worst case scenario, what if the wife, or so I guess we're narrowing it in on like husband wife or like girlfriend boyfriend relationships because that's where I most often see this with my clients, but that's not to say that this couldn't happen in like a relationship with 2 women or 2 men. The example that I gave you was a married female client that I was talking to recently who just felt like she was literally at the end of her rope, like had nothing left to give. So I guess I just wanted to clarify that. But so worst case scenario, what if the wife in the relationship or one of the partners in the relationship does get over that fear hurdle and addresses the issue, has the conversation, risks damaging her husband's or her boyfriend's ego, and he doesn't change. He just chooses like, well, that's stupid. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna help you. I'm not gonna change my routine. Um, maybe it's out of laziness. Maybe it's out of spite of like, well, you hurt my feelings. So like, no, now of course I'm not gonna help you. Like, what would be the next step? What would be the next piece of advice? Where should she go at that point?
Yeah. I would say that I view it like, it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but I view particularly a man in a relationship, again, I'm coming from the lens of men, so like,
right.
I don't have the same answer for like, if it's a same sex, like a woman and a woman relationship, I don't have the same answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but in this situation, I would say, if it's a man and a woman, I would say you view you view that behavior almost in the way that I would view an addiction. Mm-hmm. And what I tell people when they have a spouse who has an addiction is I say, there's a book out there called Get Your Loved Ones Sober, I believe. And it kind of goes through these processes of like how you support people through it, mm-hmm. through an addiction. And then like near the end of it, one of the last ones is you make ultimatums, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's struggling with addiction. And I say, in all honesty, if you go to your significant other and you're like, hey, I need these things, and they don't budge, be like, you need to be in counseling. You need to be in couples counseling. I'm going to be in counseling. And we're going to either figure this out and you're going to commit to figuring this stuff out, or I'm going to start finding my way out the door.
And I think with a lot of that stuff, there needs to be a time limit. Mm. It's not just like, at some point you need to get into counseling, or at some point we will go to counseling, because you could say that one day and the next time you think about it is 5 years later and nothing has changed. So I think it's like, you need to put some kind of time limit on it that feels appropriate for your family. Of like, within the next month, you need to get into counseling, or within the next month, I need to see significant changes around the house, or like we need to change our financial situation within the next, month, 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever it is. Because I think that a lot of people just have the like, well, I'll just put it off until next time kind of mindset of like, well, I don't want to bring it up now, I'll talk about it later. Or like, well, I can't expect immediate change, so, I'll give them time.
I would say it's the same way that I will talk to clients often when they're like, I don't know, they're like, oh, I don't know how long I want to do counseling. And I always say, well, if you invest X amount of time now, then you don't have to invest X amount of time later. And mostly, like, I basically say to them, how valuable is a healthy life to you in a roundabout way? And I say that same thing to somebody who's like to the point where they're like, I'm gonna like make an ultimatum. Now here's one caveat I'll say to that, okay? An ultimatum does not count if your decision is already made, right? Mm. So if you're coming to your husband and you're saying, I need you to change all these things, there better be an option for him to change and you to be back invested in the relationship. Yeah. So what that means for people in a relationship is you can't wait until 11 p.m., right? You can't wait until the last moment of your relationship. Mm. You have to move earlier. Mm-hmm. Okay? So like, rather than waiting till 11, move at 8. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Because you have to give the person an option, because an ultimatum that doesn't have any ability for the direction to change isn't a real ultimatum.
You have to give them some time to process what you even asked of them, and to kind of go through like the stages of grief of like, wow, I'm really shocked that they brought this up. Like, maybe I'm angry. Maybe if I had done things differently in the past, this wouldn't be happening. I feel really sad and embarrassed about it. Okay, now I've come to terms with it and I'm willing to do something about it. Yeah. Like, give them a little bit of time to process all of those stages of response, and actually figure out like, okay, how do I make those changes?
And I would say too, like, I would say the thing that I would say to men about that is I would say, there's a tons of research by John and Julie Gottman. The truth of the matter is that, again, I keep emphasizing the importance of a man in a man-woman relationship. There is super strong evidence that if a man does certain things in the relationship, it will get healthier. It's like, it's that simple, right? Like, you know, it's as simple as like, if they turn off the freaking video games and pay attention to you and turn their body to focus on you and sit across from you and really actually listen, your relationship will get healthier, right? So like, for men, I'll say the encouragement is, it's kind of in your hands in many ways. So like, get off your butt and make it happen.
Yeah.
Like, so.
Yeah. There's a fly in my coffee. Well, I really appreciate your thoughts and sharing a lot of like what the knowledge that you've accumulated, because I know you've been researching this for a while and probably will continue to do so because it's just such an interesting topic. And I appreciate your willingness to let me like verbally spew a lot of like, I keep seeing this pattern in my clients and like it like bothers me that it's bothering them. And so anyway, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughts.
And I'll just say really quick off of that too, as we're kind of wrapping up, which is if you have any more questions about it, please like drop it in the comments, because we'll be happy to like dive in deeper. I can give a deeper dive into some specific areas on it, but like that wasn't really this topic.
I think this was just kind of the tip of the iceberg. Like, this is not a be all end all conversation for this topic. There's definitely more things to like take into consideration and research and kind of mull over. And every relationship's different. But I think that this was a good start to this conversation and starting to give people a resource of like, if you're feeling this way, you're not alone. There's hundreds, millions probably of couples out there who are having some of these same kind of issues. So I hope that this was a helpful kind of like launching point for you to think about a lot of this stuff and maybe have those confrontations that you're afraid and you've been putting off. But anyway, thanks so much for joining us, guys, and we will catch you in the next one.
Take care.
All right. We ready?
Ready?
Okay.
Wow. Welcome to Open Chair Council.
Welcome to Open Chair Council.
Where we burp like normal people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right.